as I film this video, I have exactly 6 days until I touch down in American soil for the first time in a little over 14 months. And I'm gonna be brutally honest with you. I don't really feel like going back. I don't really feel like going back to the United States of America. And I know this may seem like it's coming out of left field because I've made videos in the past explaining that I was homesick. And what I've come to realize, especially over the past month or so of being in this small town here in the Netherlands, is that I don't actually miss home. I miss my family and friends, and that's a very important distinction to make, because if my family and friends all collectively decided to move to, let's say for example, South Africa, I probably would not feel compelled to ever visit the United States ever again. And I know this may sound extreme, but I've been here for 14 months. This is not the honeymoon phase. I've been through the ups and downs of living in a foreign country, and I believe I have a very grounded perspective. And in this video, I want to explain why I don't want to go back to the United States of America. The first reason being safety, or the lack thereof. So I'm not the kind of person who likes to watch the news. I actually try to avoid the news. I actively avoid watching the news because I know that the media likes to blow things out of proportion. It likes to exaggerate for engagement. That's ultimately what the media does. That's how it operates. It caters to negative emotions, and that is how it keeps people trapped in the quote-unquote matrix, so to speak. But recently, I, just out of curiosity, decided to look up what was going on in my hometown specifically. Not even the whole of the US, just my hometown, Louisville, Texas. And if you look this up, you can probably see the exact story that I'm talking about, so you know I'm not just making stuff up. But I looked up Louisville, Texas, and the first thing that I saw was a news article about how somebody had, in broad daylight, 9 a.m., in broad daylight, shot somebody's house up. And listen, Louisville is a pretty safe area. I grew up in Louisville from the age of, what, 6 years old? 5 years old even? All the way until 24, 23, whenever I left to come to the Netherlands. And Louisville was never a dangerous place growing up. There were isolated incidents, but we maybe had 3 or 4 murders a year, if that. Some years we probably didn't have any. And people are out there shooting up houses. Now, am I necessarily concerned about that happening to me? No, I'm not. Because I know that those kinds of incidents are typically the result of drug deals gone wrong, gang warfare, things that I have absolutely nothing to do with, because I keep to myself, I mind my business, I make these videos, I hit the gym, and I hang out with my girlfriend, and that's pretty much it. So I know that I don't really have anything to worry about in that regard, but at the same time, it served as a brutal reminder of the reality of living in the United States of America, which is that you can be anywhere, even in a safe area, and you can become a victim of gun violence. Or at the very least, you can experience the aftershock of gun violence. And just as another example, before I left to come to the Netherlands, there was a mass shooting in Allen, Texas, which was another city that I lived in the DFW area. And Allen, Texas is literally one of the safest areas you could ever be in. I mean, it felt every bit as safe as anywhere I've ever been in the Netherlands, just for reference. So it wasn't just safe by American standards, it was safe by global standards. And I'm sure the statistics would back that up. But somebody just decided that they were going to take their assault rifle and just start killing people. And I think he got, what was it, 9 or 10 people that day, something like that. And that could have very easily been myself, one of my family members, my girlfriend, or anyone else who would go to that specific shopping area that I used to frequent growing up with my family. And these instances, while they are isolated, again, they serve as reminders that the level of safety in the US is drastically different than the level of safety here in the Netherlands, because the risk of getting shot, whether by intention or by a stray bullet or something like that, is so minuscule out here that it doesn't even cross my mind. And look, if you're an American watching this, you might be thinking, oh, Jordan's gone soft, whatever. Yeah, I have gone soft, and I want to keep it that way. I don't ever want to have to be on edge about if my girlfriend and I are safe wherever we are, because my job ultimately is to ensure that both of us are safe. That is the promise that I made to her parents. That's the promise that I made to myself. So I don't want to go back to America, because I know that just by us being there, we are automatically less safe. And it makes it more difficult for me to keep that promise that I've made to, again, not only her parents, but also to myself. Now, the next reason why I'm not particularly enthusiastic about going to the US is because in the US, especially where we will be in Dallas, Texas, you need a car. You need a car to function. Without a car, you literally cannot function as an adult. Because at least where I lived, where I grew up, there are so many areas that are inaccessible by bike, by public transit. I mean, I don't even think there is public transit in my city. And if there is, then it's very, very rudimentary. It's not advanced by any means. It doesn't take you anywhere, is what I'm basically trying to say. But disregarding public transit, just biking, the inability to cycle from where you are to where you want to go is absolutely frustrating, and it's so mind-boggling after having been in the Netherlands, and in this past month particularly having been in a small town in the Netherlands that has maybe 1/10 of the population of my hometown, and yet somehow you can still get around by bicycle. It's not rocket science. I mean, something as simple as, you can see over here, there are suggested bike lanes on this road. Suggested bike lanes, not even real bike lanes. And I've made more videos about this particular town and what it's like to bike in this town. So if you want to see that more extensively, then you can go and watch those videos. But the point that I'm making is that Louisville, Dallas, and anywhere in the US has absolutely no excuse for that lack of infrastructure. No excuses whatsoever. Now, to Louisville's credit specifically, they did implement somewhat of a bike lane, but it's not really a bike lane, and everything is so disconnected that you just can't use bikes to get to where you want to go. You can't, because sometimes you'll be riding on the sidewalk or the quote-unquote bike lane, what they call a bike lane out there, and it'll literally just stop. That's something I've never seen out here, is a bike lane that just stops and suddenly there's grass there. The only time I've ever seen bike lanes just abruptly stop here is when they lead you into the street. It's by design, basically. Back home, a lot of times, it'll literally just stop. Imagine you see that sidewalk right there. Imagine if the sidewalk is just going and suddenly, right there, it stops and then there's just grass there. It doesn't lead anywhere else, it just stops. I never understood that. And a lot of times, you think that you can cycle over to the grocery store or something, but you can't, because even though there is a sidewalk, it just stops and now you have to go in the street. And you can't really bike in the street back home because the drivers aren't accustomed to that. So they don't know how to share the road with cyclists. And I always say that drivers, just in general, in all situations, tend to be worse in the US because the driving school isn't as extensive. I know this because I got my license at 16 and I still wasn't a very good driver. It took me probably a few months of driving alone to fully grasp driving, and that was after I got my license. So I definitely wouldn't feel safe putting myself and especially my girlfriend in a situation where we're having to cycle in the streets. So all of the cycling that we've been doing, enjoying the nice spring weather, hearing the birds chirping, all that's going to come to a stop when we land in the US, because from there on in, we're going to be driving pretty much everywhere. And obviously, I'm grateful to have access to a car. I am. But at the same time, The US needs to get its shit together when it comes to cycling. Now, the next reason why I'm not enthusiastic about going back to the US is because of the cost of living. So if you're Dutch watching this, or if you're European watching this, especially if you're not from London, Paris, or any other super disproportionately expensive European city, you might think that the cost of living where you live, in the Netherlands, in Germany, wherever else, is relatively high. And it might be relatively high compared to your wages, because I know wages in Europe tend to be lower than in the US. But here's the thing. I make money by talking to this camera. I make money by talking to this camera and by coaching people. That's how I make my money. So I'm gonna make the same amount of money no matter where I'm at. It doesn't really matter where I'm located. So it behooves me to be in a lower cost of living place, generally speaking. The US is not a lower cost of living place. Any place in the US that has a low cost of living also has a low quality of life. It also unequivocally has a low quality of life. Places like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, these are places that you could probably live for a similar overall cost of living as you do here, but you don't. This dog's trying to get to me right here, but
he likes you.
Yeah. He wants to be on the video.
Yeah, very young.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye. But the cost of living in those places comes at the expense of the quality of life. Because out here in the Netherlands, I'm actually, if I haven't already dropped this video, I'm going to make a video in the very near future about the cost of living here in the Netherlands for 2 people, because I was paying for myself and my girlfriend, so rent, groceries, all of that, health insurance, everything. And you'll see that the cost of living for 2 people is not very high. From what I remember, living on my own in the US, just groceries, just as an example, the groceries that I got for myself costed just as much as the groceries I've gotten for myself and my girlfriend this month. And I wasn't eating super extravagant foods. I was eating a whole lot of oven food and stuff like that. French fries, things of that nature. So the cost of living in general, that was 2022, by the way. It's 2025, and I've heard and seen that the cost of living has gone up. Inflation has been hitting extra hard as of late, and I'm not looking forward to paying those exorbitant prices again. And thankfully, we're in a position where we won't have to pay rent for those 3 months because we'll just be staying with my parents. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity. But I also want to show my girlfriend other cities in the US. I don't just want her to be confined to Dallas this time. I want to show her New Orleans, where I grew up prior to Hurricane Katrina. I want to show her LA, where I lived in my car for 3 months. I want to show her these places, but I know the cost of living is going to be absolutely devastating. Devastating. I have a good amount of money saved up, but one Dutch habit that I've definitely picked up is frugality. I am much more frugal now as a result of having lived here for 14 months, and I'm not looking forward to spending that extra money just for existing in the US. Now, the next reason why I am not excited to go back to the US, the next reason why I kind of just want to stay right here in Vassen, the Netherlands, is because the US is much more isolated than Europe. And what I mean by that is, I'm here in Vassen, okay? So this is kind of the middle of nowhere, so to speak, in the Netherlands. Within probably 6 hours, if I had a car, but let's just say, for example, if I went to the airport, yada, 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 within the next 8 hours or so, I could be in Paris. From where I am right now on this bench, within the next 8 hours, I could be in Paris, France. 8 hours. 8 hours from Dallas, Texas, that'll take you to New Orleans. That will take you maybe halfway across Texas going west, something like that. I think El Paso was around 12 to 14 hours away from Dallas, and that's within the same state. You drive 14 hours in any direction in the Netherlands, and you are going to be in another country. 14 hours any direction at all. 8 hours really in any direction, you're gonna be in another country. You can get to Germany, you can get to Poland, France once again, you can get to the UK probably. I mean, you can get to all of these different places. And for me, I think that's one of the biggest benefits of being in Europe. And that's a benefit that admittedly I haven't taken advantage of as much as I should have. And if we do end up not coming back to the Netherlands, which by the way, I just want to clarify, if we don't come back to the Netherlands, that does not mean we're staying in the US at all. That just means we're moving to another country, but we're not going to stay in the US. That's just not even an option at this point for the reasons that I've listed in this video. But the US is so isolated from everything else that although there is a lot of variety within the country, it's all kind of a variation of the same thing. It's all just different versions of the same thing. London does not feel anything like anywhere that I've been in the Netherlands. And I've also been to Antwerp, I've been to Zurich, I've been to Valencia. All of these cities felt very, very different from each other. And they're all within probably a 1 to 3 hour flight. And not only are they closer, but they're cheaper to travel to because of that. Because they're closer, the plane tickets cost less. So it definitely hurts knowing that traveling, in terms of traveling back home, means that we're just going to see different variations of the same thing. Whereas here, traveling means we're going to immerse ourselves in an entirely different culture, different language, different background. And I think that that lends itself very well to having a much more informed and progressive society, but that's a different discussion for a different day.